And finally, we welcome Dr. Ruth Jackson-Tao. Dr. Jackson-Tao is the curator of ancient glass in the Israel Museum, Jerusalem, and an adjunct lecturer at the Institute of Archaeology of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, from where she also holds a PhD. Her paper will focus on the glass production site at ancient Apollonia Arsuf, a glass workshop active a couple of centuries later than Jalmeh, but operating in the same tradition. So thank you and welcome, Dr. Jackson-Tao.
Thank you, Julie. So good evening, everyone from Tel Aviv. Today I will talk about this amazing site really of Apollonia Arsuf in Israel and the substantial glass production evidence that was discovered in it, dating mostly to the Byzantine period, to the 6th and the 7th century CE. Can't seem to move my slide. Yes, okay. So Apollonia is actually the first known Byzantine raw glass production center that was discovered in Israel already in the 1950s. And it is studied with an emphasis on glass-related discoveries and studies, especially from the 2000s and onwards, when another raw glass furnace was found. So I will start with a brief introduction of the site itself and its history, and then I will turn to the glass production evidence that was discovered in it. So next slide, please, because I can't seem to control it. Okay, thanks. So Apollonia Arsuf is located in the northwestern part of the modern city of Herzliya, which is north of Tel Aviv. It is situated on a kukar, which is a fossilized sandstone ridge overlooking the Mediterranean shore. The site lies between two important ancient cities, Jaffa and Caesarea, which still exist today. Next, please. The site was occupied as early as the Chalcolithic period and the Iron Age too, but with very poor remains. Only during the Persian period, Apollonia Arsuf became a coastal urban center under Sidonian rule. The town's inhabitants were the Phoenicians, and they named it after one of their gods, Reshev, as Arshuf. This Persian period funerary totem relief that you can see here actually shows a funerary banquet, which reflects on the strong Greek influences and cosmopolitan nature of the site at the time. Next, please. During the Hellenistic period, the site was renamed. The Phoenician god Reshev was identified with the Greek god Apollo as early as the 4th century BCE. The site was influenced by the region's Hellenization, or rather lingual revolution, which influenced change, and Arshuf became Apollonia. Next, please. During the Roman period, the site is first mentioned in the historical sources by Flavius Josephus, Pliny, and Ptolemy, among the coastal cities of Judea Palestina. The depiction of Apollonia on the Poitinger map along the coastal highway between Jaffa and Caesarea indicates that it served as an official leg on the country's Roman imperial road network. The most significant remains of the Roman period occupation of the site is this typical Roman villa of the peristyle type, overlooking the sea, discovered in Area E. Next, please. With typical Roman finds, table, cooking and storage vessels, and local and imported lamps. Smaller quantities of stone and glass vessels, bone objects, and human and animal figurines were also discovered, dating to the late 1st century CE, till its complete sudden destruction, probably by an earthquake in the first third of the 2nd century CE. Next, please. During the Byzantine period, the city is noted in several sources. They know the renaming of the site as Sozousa, which means savior, like several other sites named after Apollo Soter, Apollo the savior, to eradicate the pagan connotation to the gods Apollo and Reshev while still preserving the meaning. We have official documents of the Synod of Ephesus indicating that in the mid-5th century CE, the site was in the Byzantine province of Palestina Prima, and that its Christian community was actually led by a bishop. Bishops of Sozousa may have served in a church with an inscribed mosaic floor like the one we see here that was uncovered in 1962. The church remains consists of this mosaic floor with several column bases which are dated to the 5th and the 6th century CE. Other architectural remains attributed to the Byzantine period comprise of a series of industrial installations such as water cisterns, wine and oil presses, and of course the primary glass furnaces I will present in detail shortly. I want to emphasize the importance of Sozousa in late Byzantine Palestine seems to have been enhanced by the affluent Samaritan community that resided there until the Arab conquest. Here we see a typical Samaritan find. Oh, we have to go next, please. We see typical Samaritan finds, the clay lamps, which are decorated with the candelabra, the menorah symbol, and a funerary inscription with the generic Eis Theos, one God formula. Next, please. During the Islamic period, the site returned to its Semitic name and was called Arsuf. The city decreased in size and the local Samaritan community was destroyed and expelled. For the first time, the city was surrounded by a fortified wall with buttresses to resist the constant attacks of Byzantine fleets from the sea. And these are the remains that were discovered. You see here the town wall. And next, please. You see the market street. Next, please. In 1101, Apollonia was conquered by the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. There was a strategically important stronghold in the Third Crusade, during which the Battle of Arsuf in 1191 was fought nearby. The most impressive architectural remains of the site belong to this last stage of the Crusader castle, which revealed the elaborate fortifications designed with a moat, double wall system with semicircular towers, and western keep and donjon. Next, please. According to the historical sources and archaeological excavations, in 1261, the rights over the castle, town, and entire seignory, Castellum, Civitatem, and Dominium Arsuf, were leased to the Hospitaller Knights because of the Mamluk threat headed by Baybars. In mid-March 1265 CE, a large and well-prepared Muslim army under the personal command of Baybars laid siege to Arsuf. On the 26th of April, after 40 days of siege, the Muslim warriors took control of the castle's fortifications and raised the banners of Islam over the walls. The knights were sold to slavery or killed, and the entire site of Arsuf was razed to the ground and left in ruins, never to be resettled again. And now we will turn to the glass. Next, please. So the first systematic excavations at the site were carried out in 1950, north of the medieval town wall, on behalf of the Israel Department of Antiquities and Museum, first by Emmanuel Bendor and then by Pinchas Kahana. These salvage excavations were carried out in the context of the establishment of an Israel Defense Force factory that occupied a great part of the site. Next, please. So Kahana actually reported the discovery of 2 glass furnaces in areas A and D, which he dated to the early Islamic period. In area D of his excavations, he uncovered a rectangular building to which 2 small rooms had been added on the north and west. Kahana identified in the court in the southern part of the building 2 wine presses, which later became known as actually oil presses, and a square glass furnace, which you see on the bottom right, and round installation next to it, numbered 6. According to the excavator, the glass furnace consisted of 2 parts. The furnace itself, which was built of tiles and is the firing area, and the glass floor, which is the melting chamber. Kahana believed that the sand, sodium, and lime had been melted on the floor and probably cooled in the adjacent round installation. The remains of another less well-preserved glass furnace, consisting of a square floor, were reportedly found further to the east in area A of his excavations. On the basis of these 2 glass furnaces, the first to be discovered in Israel, and the large amount of raw glass which is scattered even today across the surface of the site, the excavator suggested that the site served as a glass production center as early as the Byzantine period. He also claimed that chemical analysis of the glass showed that it was quite similar to glass produced in Israel during the 1950s, while analysis of the ash suggested that the firing material was wood. In revising Kahana's conclusions, there seemed to be no sound basis for this reconstruction of the round installation as connected with the glass production process, and it may have served just as a storage facility. Although both structures were dated to the early Islamic period by the excavator, the area actually yielded mostly Byzantine and maybe early Islamic pottery. So the later dating was just based on the notion that the glass furnace was a subsequent addition to an existing compound. The photographs also suggest the structures were on an east-west axis, with the firing area on the west and the melting chamber on the east. Next, please. The large-scale excavations at the Apollonia Arsuf were carried out from 1976 and are still ongoing. The site is part of an academic project of the Tel Aviv University's Institute of Archaeology, excavated first by Israel Roll, who directed 18 seasons of excavations at the site, and from 2006, Oriental assumed responsibility for the future excavations at the site. Glass refuse indicating primary and secondary glass production was discovered in many areas surrounding the Byzantine period town. The finds include furnace remains as well as primary and secondary product remains. They consist of approximately 3,000 fragments with remains of refuse from the glass furnaces, which include raw chunks and vessel production remains. Next, please. In 2001, the site of Apollonia Arsuf became a national park. During the building of an entrance to the park in 2002, a machine-dug trench revealed the concentration of pot shreds. The trial excavation, consisting of just small 4 squares, 5 by 5 meters, yielded no architectural remains, except for pottery of late Byzantine date and some lumps of melted glass. But later, another trench was mechanically dug south of the squares for a wall adjoining the entrance. The excavated soil showed evidence of glass production, and mechanical excavation was halted immediately. 2 squares were open, and the area of the glass furnace, area N, was cleaned, revealing its firing area at the west end and its melting chamber at the east end. The 2 firing chambers on the west were open to sea winds, thus facilitating the airflow that would otherwise have involved the use of bellows, and the melting chamber was on the east. A few sections, especially in the wall that divided the melting chamber from the firing area, show that the preserved stones that framed the installation were overlain by fired mud bricks of standardized size that were probably made from the nearby Netanya Hammer bed, embedded with organic, mostly straw matter. The average dimensions of some of the ashlars may indicate they were taken from older buildings, such as the Roman villa that was discovered in Area E. Foundation trenches of earlier walls may indicate the entire installation was built upon an earlier one, using some of its construction materials to lower production costs. Since we wanted to preserve the existing furnace, we decided not to excavate below it. Next, please. Exposing the furnace showed that it contained a large glass slab, 4.445 meters on 2.95 meters, similar to the ones discovered at Bet Eliezer and at Bet Sharim. Next, please. The high-quality raw glass was transparent blue and greenish blue with a few bubbles. Next, please. Yes, next, please. Next thing, thank you. So you can see here that some of the, former one, the one before, please, the greenish one. Great, thank you. So what you see here is actually glass from the northwestern and southeastern corners of the melting chamber, that you can see that is actually more yellowish green or yellowish brown. And this is probably based on the amount of oxygen that was absorbed and made these colors. Next, please. We have numerous chunks of glass that were discovered during the excavations. We may assume they were discarded because of insufficient weight or size for trading. And we have from the excavations only one ring fragment of the Palestinian bag-shaped jar type. It may date this area to the 6th or 7th century CE. Since there are no indications of early Islamic occupation in this area and in the adjacent squares that were excavated before the furnace was discovered, we are left with the late Byzantine, presumably 6th, 7th century CE dating. And this agrees with the chemical analysis of glass, but we cannot exclude, of course, the possibility of a later, perhaps early Islamic dating. Next, please. So 15 samples were analyzed with an electron microprobe by Ian Freestone at UCL from separate chunks. They're all soda-lime silica glasses, typical of late Roman Byzantine to early Islamic glass from Turk furnaces on the Levantine coast. They're made from sands of the Levantine coast, which ultimately derived from the Nile, mixed with Egyptian natron. Next, please. So in January and February of 2017, a salvage excavation was conducted in area N1, very close to the first furnace that I just described. The finds here include debris from a mostly dismantled raw glass furnace, but another one. Next, please. The fragments consisted of 5 mud bricks that were used in the furnace's wall and ceiling, fragments of the furnace floor with raw glass, glass chunks, and glass slag. The installation was probably dismantled because of later disturbances, possibly in the Byzantine period, but more likely in recent years, when building debris was discarded from the nearby military plant in the area. The ceramic finds discovered in this excavation, especially in the context of the furnace remains, were again mostly body fragments of bag-shaped jars and very few diagnostic rims dated again to the 6th and the 7th century CE, like the furnace next to it. The evidence of these 2 furnaces could indicate they were probably perhaps built in clusters, similar to the ones that were exposed at Bet Eliezer and operated simultaneously or for a relatively brief period because they had to be dismantled upon completion of manufacturing of the raw glass to remove it from the furnace. Next, please. In 2006, 2 new areas M and O, were excavated at the site. They are contemporaneous with the furnaces discovered in the 1950s in the northern part of the site, and in 2002 in the southern part of the site in area N. In area M, which is located in the southern part of the site, we excavated a section of the city dump dating to as late as the 6th and 7th centuries. This was one of the main waste dumps inside the town of Sozousa. Some 13 tons of late Byzantine pottery were retrieved in the excavations with glass, metal, and stone vessels and objects reflecting the inhabitants' daily use of such items. We have considerable numbers of dismantled furnace remains, raw blue glass chunks, and a single moil that was found here. Next, please. So area O is situated in the northwestern part of the site. It was excavated as well as in 2006 and in 2009. And the large mosaic floor of a wine press was uncovered with the Greek inscription in the center of the treading floor. The inscription formula, together with the finds that we discovered during excavations in the area, point to a Samaritan ownership of the complex in Byzantine time, mostly 5th to 6th century CE. Such dedicatory inscriptions you see here are mostly known from Samaritan cult buildings, which are synagogues, and it is possible that the wine press may have formed part of a larger structure of a public nature associated with some cultic activity. Next, please. We have some remains from the southern section of a dismantled raw glass furnace that were found in situ near the adjacent mosaic floor. Next, please. And some raw glass chunks really very beautiful, made of bluish green glass. Next, please. And also working debris, some deformed melted pieces, a single moil. We have some raw glass chunks and vessel fragments, and 2 chunks from this new furnace that were, next, please. Yes. So what Ian did this time was take 5 raw glass chunks and 9 vessel fragments from the area M dump, together with 2 chunks from the new furnace in area O, which were analyzed again by electron microprobe, and they show the different furnaces in areas N and O produce glass of similar composition, which were working with the same recipes and the same raw materials. The glass vessels from area M dump show a relatively tight compositional cluster, suggesting that they were produced in a single workshop. The chemical analysis strongly suggests that the raw glass produced at the site was also used to make the glass vessels that have been found there, perhaps at Apollonia itself. Next, please. In 2012, 2013, and 2017, seasons of excavations were also salvage excavations initiated by the owners of the site's eastern outskirts, the Israel Lands Authority. In a series of trial and rescue excavations in the area extending from beyond the deserted military plant to the coastal highway, the site's immediate hinterland and its character were examined in the face of future possible construction developments in the area. Next, please. In areas A1 and AA and AA1. Next, please. And in areas DD2 and 3, we found some several plastered installations, including round and square collecting vats, which were paved with mosaics. The vats were part of a wine press, which is also dated to the Byzantine periods. Next, please. And we found some remains of a dismantled furnace again, and some glass lamps in these areas. Next, please. Again, some dismantled pots. Next, please. So area CC was actually the largest area of excavations in this outskirts of the site. And we found a huge refuse pit dating to the late Byzantine period, which contained numerous artifacts, including pottery vessels, metal objects, and animal bones. Next, please. These are the pottery vessels. And next, please. You can see we have found more than 200 complete Samaritan oil lamps, which were perhaps used here for cultic purposes. Next, please. And more than 700 coins, which can be dated from the 4th to the mid-6th century CE. Next, please. The glass finds include a large number of dismantled furnace remains and glass lamps. Next, please. Some raw chunks and secondary production waste remains, drops and deformed and twisted fragments. The amount of these finds shows a major role of this site in production of raw glass during the Byzantine period. Next, please. When we turn to the northern part of the site, the Crusader Castle, which is the most prominent architectural complex at the site, we sometimes find that the Crusaders who built the castle actually used glass production remains that was scattered around the site as building materials, which we see embedded in the walls or in the debris. Next, please. A series of underwater surveys was conducted by Eva Grossman and the IAA at the seaside remains of Apollonia in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. These revealed that Apollonia Arsuf had possessed 2 maritime installations, a sheltered, partially built anchorage and a built facility at the foot of the Crusader Castle. The finds discovered include a large number of stone anchors, metal and pottery vessels and bronze statues, and raw glass chunks, which can be identified as cargo. Next, please. Several of these large raw glass and furnace remains, probably discovered in Grossman's surveys, were featured in an art installation by Hila Amram in the 2015 Israeli Glass Biennale in Musa Museum in Tel Aviv, which created a stylized landscape imitating a traditional Japanese Zen rock garden. Next, please. The glass find from the necropolis of Apollonia are a well-preserved reference, which we can understand from it the glass vessel types that were perhaps used at the site during the late Roman and the Byzantine period. Next, please. And according to the lamp finds that are probably both Samaritan and Christian, we can identify the population at the site. Next, please. So glass refuse, indicating mostly primary and also secondary glass production, was discovered in the areas surrounding the Byzantine period town, in industrial areas and in city dumps. The in situ furnaces are located in areas D and O in the north and in areas N and N1 in the south. Next, please. There may be additional furnaces in surveyed areas outside the northeastern town walls, but the evidence is not conclusive as of now, as the concentration of the glass production debris noted were not excavated. Next, please. The majority of the finds are fragments of bricks from the melting chambers or tanks, from the floors, from the walls, and from the vaulted ceilings. The wall and the ceiling remains include thick mud bricks with a thin layer of glazed smooth glass, which ranges from white to light green and deep green glass. The floor remains include thick mud bricks with a layer of smooth, translucent glass, or more often a pointed layer of translucent glass mixed unevenly with the mud bricks and lime. There's a large number of small and medium raw glass chunks made mostly of bluish green glass, but also of yellowish green and light green glass. We have rounded and uneven lumps of porous dark glass, which could be actually waste from the mixing of raw glass in the furnace. They may have been left on the floor and the sides of the furnace and thus became contaminated with lime, or they may have been just remelted with cullet. We have about 100 fragments of working debris, flattened drops, deformed metal pieces and threads made of bluish green glass and moils in small numbers that were found in areas C, C, M, and O. We have some cylindrical rods with one end cut off straight and the other left rounded and uneven, but these with the moils clearly indicate the use of blowing tubes for the production of glass at the site. Next, please. According to Ian Freestone, who conducted many chemical researches on the glass finds from the area and studies by many other researchers, Egypt was also, of course, an important glass manufacturer during this period. But the Egyptian glass, it had higher soda content because of the proximity to nutrient sources, and therefore had better melting and working properties, making it easier to work. Even so, Ian clearly states in his researches that Apollonia glass was widespread and is a dominant glass type in sites in the Levant, mostly in Jordan, that were closer to the primary furnaces, but also as far as Spain and Carthage. Next, please. It seems that the accumulating evidence I presented here can provide the assumption of a large-scale manufacture of raw glass, making Apollonia Sozousa one of the most important and interesting sites for construction of ancient glass industry in the southern Levant during the Byzantine period. As the site continues to be excavated, we hope to discover and research more glass-related finds. Thank you very much for your attention. And next, please. Just want to share with you the hope for better days and to see many of you in person in the next AIHB Congress in Jerusalem in September of 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was wonderful. We already have one question in the Q&A, and if anyone has any more questions, please don't hesitate to type them in the Q&A feature. It says, thank you for your presentation. Can you please say more about how the glassmaking debris was reused in the Crusader Castle? How and into what structures was it incorporated?
Okay, so we just see it embedded in the walls. Okay, so in the walls of the castle, we just, it's in between the stones like cement, like working debris, like building material inside the walls. That's how we see it.
I couldn't unmute myself. I'm also wondering, how long was the Apollonia Glass Workshop active? few fragments, you know, compared to the thousands from Jalame. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
It's really, everything is speculation, right? So how long it, we have no idea. We do know because of the amount that there was a strong glass activity production. Jalame is a much smaller site or less excavated than Apollonia. So in Apollonia, we actually had the opportunity to excavate different sites, different areas within one site, and try to understand more the location of the glass workshop, the glass furnaces. But to say exactly how long it operated, we have just an estimate. Yeah, we can't say for sure. Very difficult.
Thank you. Another question from the Q&A, how valuable was glass compared to other commodities from the period?
Well, during this period, according as far as I can see, well, we have so many glass vessels during this period, and most of it is low cost. It's part of daily life. Of course, you always have the luxury industries operating or being made next to the daily ones. But at Apollonia, I don't see really any luxury objects being made. So it was really very, very common and quite cheap, probably. Yeah.
Thanks. Another question, can you say more about the excavated or surveyed areas around the primary furnaces? Is there evidence of other types of production taking place in these areas, like ceramics, metals, etc.?
So far, none were discovered, but we do have the oil presses. So we have industrial activities next to them, but not of pottery making. We didn't find any of those. But we do see that the outskirts are usually the areas where the industries operated. Yeah.
That's interesting. Something that I'm also curious about, and I don't know if you can answer this, but given the extent of the excavations, I was wondering if we have any information about the ratio of primary to secondary glass production in this area. Do we know how many primary sites served secondary sites?
You mean at Apollonia or in general? Because in general, DCL has to answer because she has really made a survey of the entire country. At Apollonia, I can say that we have much more raw glass production remains than the secondary glass vessel production, but we do have some remains. So we see that we believe that some glass was being made at Apollonia as well. But we think that the main really production operation was of raw glass, not of the secondary glass. That's just at Apollonia, of course.
We'll give it a few more seconds for any more questions. Oh, we have something that came into the chat privately. Are there any blowpipes found from glass blowers, and what other kinds of tools or ironworks for glass use do we have?
I don't know of any glass blowpipes discovered from these periods, unfortunately. But we do have the remains from the pontil, the molds as well, an indication, but we can't say which material, the size, the length. No, not yet. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ruth. Yeah, thank you. This has been a great first half of our session. I hope you will join us for the second half in about 20 minutes. We will reconvene at 3 p.m. Eastern time here, so we'll take a small break. So thank you again to our speakers, and thanks everyone for joining us for this session. And yes, we'll reconvene in about 15 to 20 minutes at 3 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.